Hello and welcome, shareholders, investors, and traders. There's been a lot of talk on UAV Corp, stock ticker UMAV, and I wanted to give a deep dive into the company since a lot has happened this past year. I'm going to be going over some of the positive speculations involved with the company going forward, as well as highlighting some of the negative developments we've seen from the company this year. Now, considering we are in a bull market with all-time highs, there's a lot of euphoria in the market. I don't want new investors coming in blindly to invest in this company, or any other company for that matter, without understanding the risks involved. Take this information as a baseline to help guide your own research into the company. I'll be listing my sources in the description, so you can use that as some breadcrumbs. Of course, if you find any more information that might be helpful for others, please feel free to comment below and share your findings. I will give a disclaimer that I have been invested in this company since February of this year, and like many other shareholders, I'm down on my position. However, I'm still cautiously optimistic about the company's future, and so we'll see what happens. It might be the copium talking, but for investors down a significant amount, then it doesn't make too much sense to sell now. Best case scenario, we'll see some progress with the company and see some movement in the stock price. Worst case scenario, we can trim down our position for tax loss harvesting. As you've probably heard from other sources, none of this is financial advice. Investing has risks, and you can and will lose money from investing in the market at some point. Do your own due diligence prior to investing, and be willing to lose what you put in for highly speculative stocks. Alright, with that disclaimer out of the way, let's start taking a look at UAV Corp. So, the company. UAV Corp is an aerospace company that develops lighter-than-air, or LTA, drone technology. They're headquartered in Weehawken, Florida. Try saying that 5 times fast. And their CEO is Michael Lawson. Both their corporate office and manufacturing facility are in Weehawken, and they also own the Costin Airport at the port of St. Joe, Florida. To begin, I want to set the stage with their product concept, taken directly from their YouTube channel. So, UAV Corp is partnered with a drone company, Atlantic Industrial Group, or AIG. In their concept video, they show two different kinds of drone motherships, a big ball, such as this one, and a blimp-looking ship that work in tandem with little baby drones that survey the surrounding area. UAV Corp is responsible for producing the motherships, which can act as a drone themselves, while AIG supplies the baby drones as a payload. Note that AIG is using UAV Corp's manufacturing space to produce the drones in Florida, so it is all a US-based manufacturing operation. Now, if we take a look at their latest quarterly report that was published in August, UAV Corp says they contain two wholly owned subsidiaries. The first one being R Squared Technologies Incorporated, and the second one being Skyborne Technologies Incorporated. Most of this video's focus will be on UAV Corp's subsidiary Skyborne Technology, since that is the one that produces the big airships. I'll go over the company history in a bit, but for now, I want to focus on the company's products and mission space. As of now, UAV Corp has three products. The first one is the R Squared Sentinel, which comes from their R Squared subsidiary. Nicknamed the Black Box, the Sentinel is a Wi-Fi, cellular, and BGN mobile router in a hardened case. It establishes a communication network between wired and Wi-Fi enabled devices within a secure network. The Sentinel was developed as a response to natural disasters throughout the early 2000s and 2010s, such as Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans, the earthquakes in Haiti and northern Italy, as well as the subsequent flooding events in Louisiana, North Carolina, Texas, and Florida. In each of those disasters, communication infrastructures were destroyed, which made it more difficult for first responders to save civilians. The Sentinel serves as a solution for both defense and emergency management applications because it provides an immediate command and control network and responds to a variety of adverse circumstances such as severe weather, natural disasters, power outages, and hostile attacks. Next up are the DART series of airships from the other subsidiary, Skyborne Technologies. DART stands for Detachable Airship Retractable Tether. These airships are designed to float in place in the air with or without a tether. So think of a big floating balloon on a string. If the tether is cut, then these airships are able to return to home on their own so that their payloads on board aren't lost. With this series, there are two main designs, a ball, the Dart SA-70, think spherical airship for the SA, and bullet, Dart MA-600 or 500 series. Keep in mind that these airship numbers refer to their size. UAV Corp's vision for their subsidiaries is to integrate all the combined technologies into a seamless communication platform with manned and unmanned systems for wireless communication. The system will come complete with the Sentinel communication package, a detachable airship from a tether, and drones inside the airship for launch and recovery. All these products will work together to create a system for aerial surveillance, reconnaissance, border security, and disaster relief. Back in July, UAV Corp announced that they would be creating a new subsidiary to serve as their sensor division. That division will be responsible for developing advanced optics and biosensor technologies that would serve as payloads for either the Dart airships or AIG's drones. This is in addition to the other payloads UAV Corp owns, such as the R2 Sentinel, and an AI-powered Wide Area Motion Imagery, or WAMI for short, camera under development. Now, it sounds like the sensor division was established in lieu of the partnership with 51 Labs that UAV Corp announced earlier in April. Talks of that partnership didn't go through, so UAV Corp opted to set up their own division to create sensor payloads instead of using the ones from 51 Labs. Alright, so to recap on the big picture, UAV Corp wants to produce an eye in the sky to solve problems related to surveillance, reconnaissance, emergency response, natural disasters, border security, and wartime intelligence. All of UAV Corp's products will work together to support that use case, where one mothership houses several payloads, including drones and sensors to collect data, all while relaying that information back to one another and customers through the R2 Sentinel's established network. Now, the company has also mentioned opportunities for the products in the commercial space for advertisement and transportation. The CEO, Michael Lawson, spoke on teleconferences earlier this year, saying the potential for the Dart SA-70 to have a special wrapping for advertisements, either as a stag billboard, as you see here with the Chevy airship, or something more dynamic like the Sphere in Las Vegas. He also mentioned the Dart airships could serve as a yacht to space, where passengers would travel on a luxury cruise to near space heights. Personally, I believe that the defense and emergency relief mission spaces are far more profitable for the company, and hope that the company focuses their efforts on them. At this point, you're probably asking yourselves, a big balloon? Seriously? Wouldn't that be something easy to pop? And how the heck are drones supposed to fly out of it if it needs to hold gases for lift? Now those are some great questions, and to answer them, let's take a look at the ball's specs. Here are the specs taken directly from UAV Corp's latest quarterly report. There are a few areas that I want to highlight. First, the outer envelope is made of dyneema fiber. Second, the airship uses a reverse ballonet technology. And third, the SA-70 uses a semi-rigid structure. Dyneema fiber is the same material used in soft armor vests, ballistic vest inserts, shields, and helmets, as well as armored vehicles. According to UAV Corp, their version of the fiber is 10 times stronger than steel, so our pointy boy is less of a concern. As an added bonus, the material is virtually transparent to radar because radar waves are able to penetrate the material, in contrast to how waves bounce off of metal. This means the fiber offers the airship strength and a hidden advantage during reconnaissance missions. Now, couldn't the airship still get shot down? Sure. I mean, anything flying in the air can get shot down. But keep in mind that these airships are more marketed towards establishing communication and intelligence gathering rather than going toe-to-toe with the jet. As a baseline, a ballonet is an inflatable bag inside the outer envelope of an airship, which, when inflated, reduces the volume available for the lifting gas, making it more dense. Because the air is also denser than the lifting gas, inflating the ballonet reduces the overall lift, while deflating it increases lift. Okay, so that was some word vomit. Let's think back to our high school science class and recall that density is equal to mass divided by volume. Objects with a lower density lift higher than objects with a greater density. So, when we keep the mass of our lifting gas constant, decreasing its volume, as in increasing the volume of the ballonet, will increase density, so there's less lift. Looking at our picture, the red balloon is the ballonet. Inflating it with the denser gas means its volume increases while the volume of the lifting gas decreases. Because the lifting gas's volume decreases, it becomes denser, so the overall balloon system's lift decreases. When we have a reverse ballonnet, we swap where the gases go. The reverse ballonnet contains lifting gas, so when the volume increases, it becomes less dense, which increases lift. Now, let's consider the different types of airships: blimps, semi-rigid, and rigid airships. To help explain, I'm going to refer to Veritasium's video on why airships might make a comeback.
There are three different kinds of airships. The first is a blimp, which is basically a balloon with a gondola and motors attached. Like a balloon, it is overpressurized to maintain its shape. Therefore, the skin of a blimp is in constant tension. As the blimp becomes larger, this tension increases. Moreover, it becomes increasingly difficult for larger blimps to maintain their shape. So you can't scale up blimps forever. The second option is semi-rigid. Just like a blimp, the hull is still in tension, yet now there's some added structural support to maintain the shape. The last variety is a rigid body airship. These have an internal structure to maintain their shape. Inside the hull, there are a series of gas cells filled with a lifting gas like hydrogen or helium. In this case, the gas cells are not overpressurized, so making them larger is no issue.
Alright, thank you Veritasium. By the way, I highly recommend you all to watch this video. Now, it covers airships with a focus on the transportation and logistics market for cargo. However, the base principles still apply here. UAV Corp does not manufacture blimps like the Hindenburg or the Goodyear blimp. Instead, they focus on the two other types. The Dart SA-70 is currently a semi-rigid design. It contains an interior structure to help shape the dyneema fiber and house the reverse ballonnet. The Dart 500 and 600 airships, on the other hand, are designed as rigid airships. This means that they contain several cells of lifting gases. As a rigid airship, popping one of the air cells of the Dart 600 will not cause the overall ship to burst. Instead, the airship would slowly descend, or potentially keep its altitude, if the other air cells are able to compensate. Needless to say, the rigid airship design is optimal. It's worth mentioning that UAV Corp said that they plan on changing the Dart SA-70 design to become a rigid airship, and are even planning to manufacture a new inner envelope to strengthen the ship's lift for heavier payloads. Also keep in mind that the company's potential customers are more interested in purchasing the Dart 500 and 600 series instead of the SA-70. However, the company is still using the SA-70 for testing designs and housing payloads, while the larger bullet airships are scheduled for manufacturing in 2026. Now that we understand UAV Corp's products, let's look into the drone industry as a whole. Recently, we've been seeing quite a few bullish US developments in the drone industry this year. The first one was that President Trump issued Executive Order 14307 titled Unleashing US Military Drone Dominance to support the American drone industry. In the executive order are a few noteworthy sections, including Section 4, Expanding Commercial Unmanned Aircraft Systems Operations. This orders the Secretary of Transportation to issue a proposed rule enabling routine beyond visual line of sight, or BVLOS, operations for UAS for commercial and public safety purposes. This should make it easier for companies to develop drones that operate in low airspace. Section 7, Strengthening the American Drone Industrial Base. This orders U.S. government agencies to prioritize drone companies that manufacture drones solely in the U.S., instead of those subject to foreign supply chains. Considering UAV Corp established their one-stop shop to design, manufacture, and test their airships in Florida, this is great news. Section 8, Promoting the export of American-made civil unmanned aircraft systems. This provides support for U.S. drone companies through various means, such as direct loans and loan guarantees, equity investments and co-financing, political risk insurance and credit guarantees, technical assistance, feasibility studies and grant mechanisms, market access facilitation, and any other incentive mechanisms authorized by law. So, in other words, The US government will help provide funding to companies in the business of developing and exporting drones to other countries. This is more great news for UAV Corp, since some of their prospective customers are foreign governments. The next development was on July 10th, when the Secretary of Defense, or War Now, Pete Hegseth, issued a memorandum to detail how to carry out Executive Order 14307. The memorandum contains a very noteworthy section saying that emerging technologies require new funding lines. To address the urgent need for drones, investment methods outlined in the Executive Order 14307, as in the ones in Section 8, are being investigated. The final development I want to mention was on September 15th, where the Department of State lowered the classifications of drones. This loosens export requirements for ITAR, which is the U.S. policy that restricts what U.S. companies can sell to foreign countries. Specifically, drones will now be treated like fighter jets, such as the F-16, rather than missile systems, allowing the U.S. to sidestep the 35-nation Missile Technology Control Regime agreement it signed in 1987, and enabling drone sales to countries like the UAE and Eastern European nations that have struggled to acquire America's best unmanned aerial vehicles. All in all, this is great news for U.S. drone companies. Alright, so now maybe you're thinking, this all sounds well and good, but it probably only applies to smaller drones like quadcopters and little airplane looking ones, right? Who the heck would be in the market for a giant ball? Well, it turns out there is a demand for aerostats in airships. And some of the demand is fairly recent. Let's take a look at a few. First up was the Joint Land Attack Cruise Missile Defense Elevated Netted Sensor, or JLENS for short, contract that the U.S. Army first awarded in 1998. This contract was initially estimated at $292 million, with Raytheon as the lead contractor for the program. Raytheon was in charge with developing the JLENS radars, and it worked with TCOM to manufacture the blimps. Several other subcontractors were involved, but Raytheon and TCOM were the primary ones. The JLENS contract continued all the way to 2015 and faced several setbacks, where the systems failed to meet several requirements such as tracking flying objects and distinguishing friendly aircrafts from threats. What kept the program alive was a strong lobbying front, but the program was eventually shut down in 2017, likely because one JLENS blimp escaped from the test facility in Aberdeen Proving Ground, Maryland, and floated all the way to Pennsylvania. Now, since these airships were tethered, those tethers dragged all the way to Pennsylvania, which took out power lines and caused several large power outages in the state. So yeah, not a good look. Next up is a contract Saudi Arabia awarded to TCOM, yes, the same company who built the JLEN blimps, for $217.3 million. This contract is to produce tethered aerostats for communications and intelligence. Work is scheduled to be completed by the end of March 2027, so it's still to be determined on how well that contract goes. In May 2024, Poland signed a $1.2 billion deal to buy 4 aerostat-based early warning systems from the US. Poland started negotiations to acquire aerostats from at least 2017, but only submitted a purchase request in May 2023. In February 2024, the U.S. Department of State approved the foreign military sale and was then authorized by Congress. The principal contractors involved in this deal include Raytheon, TCOM, ELTA North America, and Kinetics subsidiary Avantis Federal. So we're seeing some similar players on this contract. This past March, the Pentagon announced a $4.2 billion 10-year contract to build lighter-than-air systems, tethered systems, and elevated sensors for the Army. This contract was awarded to a series of 10 different companies, which includes Raytheon, TCOM, Leidos, Kinetic, Advanced Technology Systems, Elevated Technologies, and Sky Ship Services, to list a few. So, needless to say, the recently awarded contracts demonstrate that there is indeed a demand for aerostats. Now, the thing to keep in mind is that a lot of these contracts are scheduled to deliver airships quite a bit out in the future. This means that if UAV Corp is able to make progress in their tests, then they may be able to compete in the market and attract buyers to win contracts. Alternatively, if UAV Corp makes significant progress, then we could see a situation where one of those big US defense contractors may try to buy out the company so as to accelerate their own development timelines. Just to briefly mention it, UAV Corp's CEO Michael Lawson discussed in this past February's teleconference that the company was in talks with several other drone companies interested in having UAV Corp merge with them together into an existing NASDAQ company. Now, will we see that actually play out? Who knows, but only time will tell. Keep in mind, too, that China's also been experimenting with aerostats. Remember that Chinese balloon in 2003?
Right now we're following new warnings from Washington to Beijing about the Chinese spy balloon now flying over the United States. U.S. officials not ruling out the possibility of shooting down the balloon.
Although there has been much information since then, it's probably safe to assume China has been working on their own airship technology. It's worth noting that the spy balloon wasn't from UAV Corp, although it does share some similar features.
As soon as the Chinese spy balloon story broke, Skyborne Technology CEO Mike Lawson started getting the question, is the balloon yours?
All of a sudden all this news appeared and then my phone started ringing. And I said, gee whiz, what is this? So I had to take a look and I said, golly, that looks just like ours. So anyway, the next day, we have some local folks that basically called and then also put it on Facebook and said, boy, look at this. We're building one in Gulf County, that looks identical to this.
While they both are large in size and have similar characteristics, the one being built in Gulf County is different, and the state and federal government are both fully aware of the project.
It seems as if the Chinese are using the jet stream and the current to be able to move the airship in the air for their propulsion. Our technology, we're designed to stand still. For instance, we want to help countries in, for instance, even in Gulf County in the state of Florida.
Lawson says he is not surprised the government could not track the Chinese balloon.
You can't, unless you have a transponder on board or some device to tell where it's at, you can't find it. Now, you might see it, but you can't find it on radar based on there's no heat signature. And so the principles of why they can't track it, we know why.
Skyborne is building its balloon for disaster recovery efforts using funding from Triumph Gulf Coast and Gulf County. Lawson says he hopes the new moon of Northwest Florida will take flight within 90 days. In Panama City, Courtney Evans, News 13, Panhandle Strong.
Lawson says he's received inquiries on an international level. Just today, officials in Turkey reportedly asked if he could help them out with the earthquake recovery efforts. Skyborne's unable to do that now, but Lawson says he hopes to one day say yes in the future.
Before we take a look at UAV Corp's origins, let's briefly consider the UAV market size. This year, the UAV market size was at $41.26 billion. Last year, it was at $36.41 billion. According to Fortune Business Insights, it is estimated that the market size will grow to $125.91 billion in 2032. Keep in mind that the UAV market isn't limited to the conventional drone that you see pictured here. It also includes aerostats that UAV Corp is working on. Needless to say, there's a lot of future growth in the space. Alright, so on to the history of UAV Corp. From their April 2021 preliminary offering circular, UAV Corp was originally incorporated on December 29, 1995 in Wyoming as International Network Marketing Group Incorporated, subsequently changing its name to PortalZone.com Incorporated on March 1, 2000, then to Status Wines of Tuscany Incorporated on June 27, 2000, then to Mariner's Choice International Incorporated on May 30, 2007. On January 18, 2013, the company re-domiciled in the state of Wyoming. On September 23, 2015, the company changed its name to Han Tong Technology Incorporated. In 2016, the company abandoned operations and focused on seeking an acquisition target. On January 27, 2020, the company purchased R-Square Technologies Incorporated, a Delaware corporation being held as a wholly owned subsidiary, R-Squared. They then submitted a name change from Hong Kong Technology Incorporated to UAV Corp to the state of Wyoming on June 8, 2020. They applied to FIRNA and the OTC markets for a name and symbol change, receiving approval from FIRNA for the name change to be UAV Corp with the effective date January 11th, 2021, and began trading under the new symbol UMAV as listed on OTC markets on February 10th, 2021. With R squared also came Skyborne Technology Incorporated, which is a 100% wholly owned subsidiary. Skyborne Technology is a Florida corporation that was incorporated on August 23rd, 2018. Alright, so clearly a lot of moving pieces here with the company. The point being that UAV Corp was not originally founded as a company in the UAV industry. Instead, it was a series of failed companies that decided to change gears and acquire a company in an emerging field and perform a reverse merge to make that company's industry its focus. So when UAV Corp says it's trying to pay off toxic debt from its Hong Kong technology era, this is what they meant. Here are the word-for-word quotes from that offering circular, so feel free to pause it and read it. However, it covers what I just said from the previous slide. So now I'm going to move on to the CEO. As mentioned earlier, the CEO of UAV Corp and Skyborne Technologies, for that matter, is Michael Lawson. To be honest, you can't really talk about this company without this guy, since he was involved with several previous aerostat companies. The two notable ones being eGreen Technologies Incorporated and Texsphere Systems International LLC. Note that Lawson wasn't the CEO for Texsphere Systems International in 2009, but I'm just listing that date there to show that's at least how long the company existed. Besides those companies, he was also involved in making space-related commercials for a variety of companies like Pepsi and Pizza Hut. Let's take a look at the web of companies Lawson was involved in before Skyborne and UAV Corp. Our time begins with Texsphere Systems International. This appears to be the first aerostat company that Lawson ran as the CEO. In the summer of 2004, it established a partnership with several other companies in order to build and market aerostats. In the partnership, 21st Century Airships designed the airships, Texsphere Systems manufactured the airships, Sierra Nevada Corp supplied payloads to put it into the airships, and Cyber Aerospace Corp was in charge of the global marketing. 21st Century Airships had quite a history of designing airships, which I'll discuss a bit more later. And Cyber Aerospace Corp belonged to a layer of subsidiary companies, ultimately owned by the holding company, Proximity Digital Networks. Real quick, here's one press release from 2004 talking about the collaboration. As you can see, they received two contracts, one from a U.S. government agency and another from the U.S. Navy. It is not completely clear as to what happened with that partnership or how well those contracts went. It is possible that their efforts were overshadowed by the JLENS program and didn't go much further. However, Texsphere was acquired by Cyber Defense Systems in May 2005. It is unclear what happened with the companies further, but it's possible that the parent company may have made poor leadership decisions and they went out of business. If anyone has sources of what exactly happened to the two companies, please drop it in a comment below. I'd love to take a look at it. Now, interestingly enough, Lawson founded eGreen Technologies in 2008 to continue playing in the airship business. Instead of marketing the airships towards defense, he opted to focus on sustainable energy and transportation. While it's not clear as to why Lawson pivoted towards a different direction with airships, I suspect that there could have been two reasons. The first one being that Cyber Defense Systems and Texsphere Systems issued a non-compete to Lawson so that eGreen could not target the defense industry. This could make sense since Lawson was no longer a part of those two companies, and the second reason could have been that Raytheon and TCOM's failures with the JLENS contract was getting bad press, so it made sense to pivot out of the defensive industry and into sustainable transportation. Keep in mind that those two reasons are purely my speculation and has not been confirmed by the news articles I could track down. Again, if you can find any leads explaining more of what actually happened with eGreen, Texsphere, and so on, I'd love to hear it. It's worth pointing out that in November 2009, eGreen acquired 21st Century Airships, which gave the company access to its portfolio of 18 issued and pending patents. By that time, 21st Century had successfully flown 14 prototypes that demonstrated various features of their airship designs, including the subscale Voyager prototype, and had an advanced design for their full-scale Voyager non-rigid, 19-passenger next-generation sightseeing airship. Also keep in mind that 21st Century Airships was licensing its designs to both Techsphere Systems and Cyber Defense Systems since the 2004 partnership, up until eGreen Technologies acquired it. So, the company acquisition gave eGreen Technologies an acceleration in its research and development phase, and was able to build off on existing designs. Now, it is unclear as to what happened to eGreen Technologies. According to their Twitter account, which is still up, they announced that they had their third successful inflation test on March 18th, 2011. Ever since then, it's been radio silence. It seems as though they closed up shop in 2012. Like Techsphere Systems, the exact details are unknown, so if anyone has more details on what happened, I would highly encourage you to let us know, as I would definitely greatly appreciate it. It's possible that marketing the airships as a green form of transportation did not get any traction, so the business fell off. I'd like to take a look at the 2004 partnership again and draw some parallels to what we've seen from this year's news. The 4 companies involved in 2004 played a specific role in getting some traction for contracts. In 2004, the airship designs came from 21st Century Airships, and now they come from Skyborne Technologies. We'll look into some of the airships over time in just a bit, and when we do, you'll see how Skyborne's DART series of airships evolved over time through Lawson's previous companies. As for manufacturing, that was Techsphere Systems' job, which is now done in-house by Skyborne Technologies. In 2004, Sierra Nevada Corp was responsible for providing payloads to the airship, and today it is provided by a few players. The first being UAV Corp's subsidiary R2, with their R2 Sentinel. Next is the venture capital holding company Atlantic Industrial Group, AIG, who designs defensive and civilian aerospace drones. Finally, is the newly announced UAV Corp Sensor Division. Again, the Sensor Division was established in lieu of the BioSentry Division partnership with 51 Labs. That partnership was originally to create biosensor payloads, but that partnership ultimately fell through in July. As for the marketing, it is now handled by UAV Corp instead of relying on a separate company back in 2004. Given that UAV Corp is a holding company, it is trying to orchestrate its subsidiary companies to fulfill the different roles we saw back in 2004. Out of all the roles, I think the payload integration is the most important to consider today. Sure, a big airship is cool, but what really matters is the tech inside, as that is what is able to gather data and quickly respond to the surrounding environment. As UAV Corp develops itself and its partnerships, I'd be curious to see how the payloads turn out. So this all begs the question. We saw Lawson try selling airships to multiple companies, and they all failed. Why would this time be any different with UAV Corp? Well, first of all, there's been a lot of technological advancements since the early 2000s. Drone designs have completely changed. They're smaller, faster, more energy efficient, and more powerful than ever before. The whole Internet of Things connectivity has changed, and it is easier than ever to integrate a bunch of different sensors and devices with one another, and send data over impressive speeds. We also have AI advancements going on, which can be integrated into these drone payloads and the DART airships to orchestrate multiple devices autonomously at the same time. Second of all, we've been seeing a lot of global tensions increase as of late. There's been the Russia versus Ukraine war, tensions between China and Taiwan, and the conflict between Israel and Hamas. Not only are those countries interested in defense technologies, but their surrounding neighbors are too, so that they can mitigate any potential conflicts that might be headed their way. After all, just look at Poland's push for aerostats. Third, we've seen a lot of policies coming from the US government this year that are trying to advance the US drone industry. And finally, we've also seen that the US and foreign governments are interested in airships again. Although the JLENS program failed throughout the 2000s, the fact that there are newly awarded contracts for airships now shows an effort to retry aerostats. Because of all these factors, this seems like the best chance for one of Lawson's aerostat companies to actually make progress in sales. However, it is still possible that Lawson is just trying to squeeze out what he can from the same basic designs. I won't deny that argument from the bears, especially when we haven't seen a lot of materialized deals and test progress with the company. However, if we can trust that UAV Corp can complete their upcoming tests, and their LOIs are real enough to be materialized on completion of those tests, then we could see a lot of progress being made to the business very quickly. However, the state of the company is still highly speculative. Now to the fun part with this deep dive, looking at the history of UAV Corp's airships through Lawson's other companies. As mentioned before, the original airships came from the Canadian company 21st Century Airships, and we can't talk about this company without mentioning its founder, Håkan Kolting. If we jump back to the spiderweb of predecessor companies, we can see that 21st Century Airships had a history of previous companies and mergers as well. These were ultimately tied to Kolting, who was quite the balloonist. From his experience with hot air balloons, Kolting eventually came up with the spherical and bold airship designs, and created several patents for them. You can look up his patents on Google Patents, and see some of the schematics he came up with for the airships, as well as some of the techniques he created to keep them afloat. Not only did Kolting create the airship designs, he piloted them too. Some of Kolting's first patented designs were for the Voyager prototype, a boat-like design that you see here. He also designed the spherical airship that was licensed to Techsphere in the early 2000s. Note that Techsphere seemed to be more interested in the spherical airships, which is probably where Techsphere got its name from. Also keep in mind that it was the Aerostat SA-60 that was considered for the government contracts in 2004. According to the table here from the Lyceum Group of San Diego, several of the Aerospheres were flown, but there weren't any confirmed orders. When eGreen Technologies acquired 21st Century, their designs seemed to focus back on the bullet design, that being the Bullet 125 and 580, which were both based on the original Voyager prototype. It was the Bullet 580 that completed the inflation test, mentioned in eGreen Technologies' tweet back in 2011, before the company went radio silent. Now, pictures and words are cool and all, but there are actually videos of these airships on YouTube. All credit goes to those channels' owners. I have each video listed in the description, and we'll go over a brief snippet of each. Personally, I find these videos and the airship history to be pretty cool, so it's awesome that we have video recordings of these flights. It's also pretty cool to see a snapshot of the early 2000s when times were much simpler than today. Anyways, these videos go to show that UAV Corp's airships existed in some form in the past, so as long as UAV Corp can establish a testing schedule, I'd argue that there shouldn't be any technical problems with the flights. First off, we have a video from the AP archive about Techsphere Systems Airship 64 from 2004. This is from one of the flight tests during the big partnership between Techsphere Systems, 21st Century Airships, Sierra Nevada Corp, and Cyber Aerospace Corp. You'll notice some familiar faces like Mike Lawson and Håkan Kolting. This flight test is essentially what we can expect to happen after UAV Corp completes the weight balance analysis. Next up, we have a video from what I believe to be a former eGreen Technologies employee, B986AT. That's quite a name. But if you look at this person's channel, you'll see a bunch of other videos pertaining to other eGreen airship inflation and flight tests. It's a big old soccer ball. I'll quickly skip over to some of the other sections of this video, just so you get an idea that this thing does fly. Again, I encourage you all to try to look at these videos and get a better sense of what was going on with these airships. And I mean, these are just cool to look at anyways. And you might be asking if this video is really from a flight test in 2005. And that's because wouldn't the title be incorrect, attributing the soccer ball to eGreen Technologies? And I'd agree with that observation, so I'm a little confused as to why it says eGreen. But we have a longer video of the soccer ball from one of the pilots of the airship next. This is a video coming from Carl Bjarke's channel. And I apologize if I'm butchering your name. but you'll see that he has quite a few videos from his time working with 21st century airships, and I assume working alongside TechSphere Systems and E-Green Technologies. I was able to find his channel because he commented on the previous AP Archive video. Given that this video is titled Airship 2005, and it's of the same soccer ball, it seems to be directly tied to the video we just saw that was titled with E-Green Technologies. Could the video be of different flight tests? Possibly, but we could also have two videos at different angles. And if they are of the same flight, then E-Green could have just posted the video on the other channel as a promo campaign. Regardless of the actual flight date, both videos show the same CFZRY airship, which is a successor to the TechSphere's Airship 64 and a predecessor to UAV Corp's Dart SA-70. Here's a specific clip where Carl goes over the ship's interior, which should be fairly similar to the Dart airship. We can expect a few differences to the Dart SA-70's makeup, but this should at least give a baseline of what to expect.
Here we are inside the world's biggest soccer ball. There's the flight deck. Generator and fuel deck. Pressurization fans. And above us is the helium bladder.
I highly recommend you all to watch the full 58-minute video on Carl's channel, as it shows what the entire test flight looks like, from setup to launch to landing. Now, here we have some videos of E-Green's main focus, the Bullet series of airships. Recall that these bullets are based on the Voyager prototype from 21st century airships, which then became the Bullet 125 and Bullet 580 models. All these airships were the predecessor to the Dart MA 500 and 600 airships that UAV Corp is planning to sell if their $525 million of LOIs are converted to contracts. It is likely that E-Green Technologies put a lot more effort into the Bullet series because there's a better design for the eco-friendly transportation spin they focused on as a business. The spherical airships were likely too small to fit the amount of cargo that their prospective customers wanted. Here's another video on the CFJUY airship preparing for flight, or as Carl called it, the Tic Tac. And another short video of the Tic Tac flying. Now, we finally get to E-Green Technologies' final Bullet airship, which comes from the company's YouTube channel. This appears to be one of the inflation tests the company tweeted on in 2011 before going radio silent.
Although they've been around for centuries, airships soar into the 21st century with the inflation of the world's largest lighter-than-air vehicle. You're looking at the Bullet 580 airship from E-Green Technologies and 21st century airships. It's 2/3 the length of a football field with unprecedented capabilities for homeland security, disaster relief, advanced communications and navigation, supporting new missions high in the sky to save lives. This massive new airship will be a true multitasker as it ushers in a new age of flight, breaking records and perceptions in the process. It goes beyond the range of satellites, helicopters, and fixed-wing aircraft.
Slow enough to be a sightseeing capability, large enough to be heavy cargo, and enough volume of lifting capability to be fly at 15, 20,000 feet unmanned.
I'm going to jump to a later part in the video. Again, feel free to watch this entire video. I highly recommend it to understand more on the history of UAV Corp. But I found this part to be pretty funny.
It will be environmentally friendly. Its engines will be powered by algae fuel. So safe, you could drink it.
It's very true. I've tried it, and it is very true. It's not very tasteful.
Garrett Coliseum in Montgomery, Alabama.
So yeah, apparently you can consume the algae fuel, which is kind of funny. But if we go back to 18 seconds of this video, we'll notice something that looks awfully familiar, don't we? Where could this have been? Oh, that's right. It's the giant airship that was posted on UAV Corp's website. It's interesting to note that nowhere on UAV Corp's website do they specifically mention this airship model or any connections to eGreen Technologies or TechSphere Systems. Not even in Lawson's bio or his LinkedIn profile. And that's besides even mentioning how outdated UAV Corp's website is, with their latest company developments and PRs from earlier this year. Their last press release on their website at the time of recording is from 2023, so it's missing a lot of PRs we've recently gotten. Honestly, their outdated website's a bad look, and this gives another point to the bears. The final video I want to bring up is on the modern Dart SA-70 airship. This video only shows Skyborne at work with inflating the airship and mounting the motors on the airship. It doesn't actually show the airship flying. And it's important to note that the story says it's from 2022.
New moon of Northwest Florida should be completed next month. Lawson says they'll use this design to test the capabilities of the larger 350-foot yacht to space. This airship will carry passengers to the edge of the atmosphere.
So this brings up an interesting question. Why didn't the airship fly during that next month? And why are we only seeing revamped test attempts this year? I'll admit it, it sounds a bit fishy, and this could be seen as a red flag with the company. While this may not have been the primary reason, keep in mind that Skyborne Technologies is headquartered in Florida. And what happens in Florida during the summer and the fall? Hurricanes. Now, I'm not excusing delays, but they could have been affected by the 2022 hurricane season. Hurricane Ian was pretty devastating, given that it was a Cat 5, so that likely affected their operations and planned test flights. But with all this said, what's the point of showing these videos of flying airships? I mean, they're cool and all, but what's the ultimate point I'm trying to get across? Well, it demonstrates that Lawson's companies have had experience developing actual prototype products that have successfully flown before. This means that UAV Corp's Dart series of airships aren't completely untested, and they have a history of research and development behind them. The problem, though, is that Lawson failed to sell these airships to prospective customers before. The rise and fall of those previous companies without any substantial developments does raise concern as well. However, if we can trust that the LOIs UAV Corp announced earlier this year go through, then that story could change. Of course, could being the keyword here. Alright, so that history has given us a baseline for UAV Corp and related predecessor companies. We should now have a decent understanding of UAV Corp's roots, which will help guide us to looking at more modern history. And by more modern history, we're going to focus from the end of 2024 until today, because that is when the stock price got really interesting. And I suspect is when most of the current investors got into the company. This is UMAV's share price plotted over 1 year from October 4th, 2024 to October 3rd, 2025. I'll be plotting some noteworthy milestones with the company, which have influenced the company's story. Keep in mind that this is a sample and does not cover all the news, PRs, ex post, etc. from the company. The ones in green are considered bullish, while the ones in red are bearish. To begin, UAV Corp announced a partnership with AIG on December 4th, 2024. On December 16th, UAV Corp announced that they would be lowering their authorized share count from 2 billion to 800 million. On December 20th, UAV Corp announced their plan to start building the Sky Hangar in winter 2025. As an aside, UAV Corp has recently been posting on X that they are working on the hangar plans, but still have not given firm information on construction timelines or how much it will cost. On January 6, 2025, UAV Corp announced their plan to secure $1.5 billion in contracts throughout 2025. On January 8th, the company announced they received a $20 million letter of intent, or LOI for short, and that they plan to further reduce the authorized share count to 500 million. On January 13th, the company announced they received $105 million in LOIs. On January 15th, the company announced that they are engaging with legal counsel to kick off the uplisting process to OTCQB. UAV Corp also mentioned that their ultimate goal is to uplist to NASDAQ. By uplisting, UAV Corp hopes to make the company more official so to attract investments from institutional investors. It should be noted, though, that OTCQB requires companies to have a minimum share bid price of 1 cent, and NASDAQ requires a minimum of $1. On January 17th, UAV Corp posted on X that the Wyoming Secretary of State received their $1.5 billion authorized share reduction request and was processing it. The paperwork was then filed on January 28th and was then provided to the OTC market for execution. This completed the authorized share reduction. Now, you probably noticed that the stock price already peaked by this time and was dumping on this announcement. I'll talk more about what was going on here later, but for now, just note that this was because of share conversions. If we jump to March 4th, UAV Corp announced that they received a $420 million LOI for their Dart 600 series of airships. This is in addition to the $105 million LOI they announced earlier in January, which makes all the announced LOIs add up to $525 million. On March 14th, the company announced an upcoming inflation test for their Dart SA-70 airship. Their PR said that the inflation test would be in 30 days. However, that test was slightly delayed until April 24th, when the SA-70 inflation test completed and succeeded. Note that the inflation test marked the beginning of a series of tests for the SA-70 that would be the driving force for converting the $525 million in LOIs to actualized contracts. In order to convert the LOIs, the Dart SA-70 would need to complete an inflation test, weight balance analysis test, and then flight tests. Those LOIs would be satisfied on the completion of the flight test milestone. Keep in mind that the airship orders in these LOIs are for the Dart 500 and 600 series of airships, and not so much of the SA-70. The SA-70 is instead serving as a proof of concept for the airships that will be purchased, and gives potential buyers an indication that UAV Corp is ready to execute the orders. However, it is worth mentioning here that UAV Corp's team is very, very small. Yahoo Finance says the company only has 6 full-time employees, and the company website lists 10 people on their management team. The most accurate number is most likely 5 full-time employees, since that is what is listed in their latest quarterly report. Regardless of the actual amount, UAV Corp does not have enough employees yet to build out the airships. These tests are so critical for the company because by converting the LOIs to contracts, UAV Corp would then have access to funds that could then be used towards hiring employees and gathering the resources needed to manufacture the airships. Needless to say, the company is still in their early stage and needs these contracts in order to grow and grow quickly. Alright, back to the timeline. With the inflation test done, now comes the weight balance analysis test. However, UAV Corp has been pushing back the test and announcing delays ever since their May 8th teleconference. Why? Because the company only has one pilot, and that pilot is not a U.S. citizen. They announced in an early teleconference that they had a U.S. pilot, but he unfortunately passed away. This means that until they are able to train new pilots, UAV Corp is reliant on the foreign pilot. The story since May has been getting a work visa for the pilot from the U.S. government. And we had several X posts talking about it. And it was the story for June, with even more X posts. Feel free to pause and read these if you want, or check their X account. And the story was the same for July. And for August. And for September. If you've been paying attention to US politics, you'll know that legal immigration is a very lengthy process, and it is still a pain for issuing non-immigrant work visas. You probably also heard about President Trump's recent proclamation that makes obtaining H-1B visas even more difficult, and the $100,000 fee for companies that hire foreign workers. I'm not going to go into the politics, since that is not the purpose of this video, and there are plenty of other sources out there that give more details on the H-1B visa story. I will note, though, that there's been a recent lawsuit challenge on the $100,000 fee, so this whole thing is yet to be determined. It's also worth mentioning that this policy was announced after many of these pilot updates, so it is unclear as to how this affects our pilot timeline. From all of these delays, you can imagine and understand shareholder frustration at what seems to be UAV Corp dragging their feet with the weight balance analysis test. Now, UAV Corp eventually teased a teleconference for September 18th, which would finally update shareholders on the test pilot's entry, status for the weight balance analysis test, flight tests, and more. This is certainly what shareholders needed, because it felt like we were being left in the dark for several months. However, in typical UAV Corp fashion, this was postponed yet again for an unknown date. As of the time of this video, we are still waiting on this teleconference. Even though our teleconference was postponed, UAV Corp dropped big news that an advanced $20 million LOI was being converted to a source of financing for up to $50 million as a term sheet. I suspect that this is the same $20 million LOI that was announced back in January, but we do not have a clear confirmation if that's the case or who is the one supplying the funds. We've been given hints at where these funds from the term sheet will go through various X posts. Keep in mind that these details have not been finalized, and we have not seen an official PR announcing the term sheet yet. From what UAV Corp has informally announced, these funds will go towards completing the DART SA-70 tethered drone airship, purchasing certain advanced optics and sensor technologies as airship payloads, start building the Sky Hangar, and this is the same hangar that the company announced last December, and will be where the larger DART 600 series of airships will be manufactured. Retiring the remaining company debt. This is absolutely huge for shareholders. Keep in mind that the reason why UAV Corp has been diluting shares so much is to resolve debt, so this would give a chance for the stock price to breathe. And finally, the company hinted at buying back shares. While not confirmed to be a provision in the term sheet, UAV Corp posted that their goal is to buy back shares. Considering the stock's current market cap is below $1 million, a share buyback would increase buying pressure and could help the share price climb in a big way. Keep in mind that in order for UAV Corp to uplist to OTCQB, they must have a share price of at least 1 cent. Also keep in mind that the share buybacks are a goal and not a guarantee. This means we still run the risk of UAV Corp doing a reverse split to artificially increase the share price. With all that said, this term sheet is a very big deal for UAV Corp. Not only would this provide the funds necessary to finish upcoming tests and jumpstart order production, but it also fixes the debt problem that's been plaguing the company since its days as Hong Kong Technologies. So, let's now mark that on the timeline. Now, there are 2 more events that I want to plot. These are pertaining to the authorized share increases. We saw our first increase from 500 million to 1 billion on July 3rd, and the second increase from 1 billion to 2 billion on September 23rd. Yes, this is after the $50 million term sheet that was announced. Let's also mark these 2 events on the timeline. I'll be honest, I was surprised and frustrated at the company's decision to increase the authorized shares back to 2 billion. After all, we just had news of a $50 million term sheet that was supposed to solve our debt problems, and this completely undoes the authorized share reductions made earlier this year. If the reductions were originally to provide shareholder value, then the reversing that effort felt like a spin in the face to us shareholders. After months of constant dilution, the share price has turned to dust, and shareholder sentiment has been at an all-time low. So what's the deal? Now, to answer that question, I'm going to put on a very speculative hat and suggest why we are seeing this now. And I'm going to argue that this has everything to do with what happened earlier this year in January. Alright, so finally time to address what happened from the peak of 16 cents to the massive crash to 3 cents and the continued dump to what we've been seeing for months. The answer? Share conversions. If we listen to UAV Corp's February 25th teleconference on X, this question was asked.
I'd like to ask, just kind of being real direct, so what about those share conversions? Really, I got to ask, where's the fight? Where's the fight at there, bro?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. We were very, personally, I was upset about it. You can't get too emotional about it because it's business is business. But we did have one that hit us pretty hard, and it dropped the share price. It dropped the share price from about 16 cents down to 3 or 4 cents. That hurt, and that's not fair to the shareholders. However, in the mix of that, you learn. You live and learn. And so we have been in discussions corporately with counsel from on this particular conversion. And I feel very, very strong that we'll come up with a resolution so this doesn't continue. Now, there are some conversions that did happen that we did sign off on to get rid of some debt, but we're watching it very, very closely. We also are negotiating with the large debt piece, which they did do a conversion, and they still are processing one of those conversions, but we are negotiating for a buyout, and we feel that we'll be able to bring resolution on that as well. But it's managed, and it's not out of control. So we're very fortunate. We've got a handle on it, and we look forward to building this company and pushing forward.
That was from Michael Lawson. He acknowledged that debt holders opted to realize shares from convertible debt, which led to new issuances of common shares. Because so many shares were issued in a short time span, and those debt holders sold their shares immediately, selling pressure spiked, which killed momentum and tanked the stock price. Even after the February teleconference, we continued to see shares being issued for the purposes of convertible debt. In hindsight, we can see that share conversions and debt management absolutely went out of control, because UAV Corp had to double the authorized shares twice and dilute the stock price all the way down to the triple zeros, which is where we're at now. Here are some snippets from Section 3.A of UAV Corp's quarterly report detailing the issuance history. This particular snippet shows the shares issued in January. As you can see, millions of shares were converted at a time. Given that the authorized share cap was at 500 million, each issuance of 10 million shares quickly ran up the outstanding share count. And it didn't stop in January. It also went to February, March, April, and all the way up until today. Also note that these shares were originally quoted to debt holders at a par value of 0.0001. This meant that no matter what the shareholders sold their shares at, it was for a massive profit. Since this quarterly report was posted on August 12th, we've also seen notices of supplemental issuances. Now, these shares were primarily directed towards Matterhorn partners, and were also for the par value of 0.0001. Like the other debt holders, Matterhorn was able to quickly dump their shares to the market and make a significant profit. Long story short, shareholders have been getting absolutely crushed because there is a never-ending wave of shares flooding the market at a far lower par value than what shareholders can buy themselves. All things considered, it makes sense as to why the share prices dropped to the triple zeros. Just this past week, we had a low of 0004. That's still at least a 4x multiple on what someone like Matterhorn got their shares for, but it's still very close to reaching that number. So what? How is this in any way strategic? Well, this short-term bloodbath for shareholders should get rid of the convertible debt all at once. Think of it this way. What better time is it to destroy a stock? When the stock price is already destroyed and shareholder sentiment is at an all-time low, or when the stock price is blasting off the moon? we already saw what happened with the latter in January. Shareholders want to see a stock hold value. The only way to do that is to reverse the order of operations we saw in January, so that positive company develops can build off on one another without being reversed by negative developments inwoven between. Is it painful and unfair to the loyal shareholders? Yes. But it is unfortunately the price to pay for positioning the company for long-term strength. If UAV Corp keeps their promises and fulfills their LOI orders, then we could see the company growing to a market cap orders of magnitude higher than now. So shareholders who stick around could be rewarded handsomely. Again, keyword being could. After all, the only thing the company can do now while waiting for the pilot's visa is to fix their finances so that it won't continue eating away at the company's future. If successful, and this is a big if, this gambit means that there will not be future share conversions to kill stock momentum, so gains should theoretically hold if there's sufficient buying pressure. This also means that UAV Corp could purchase back shares at low prices without having debt holders completely reverse the buying pressure. If the company buys back enough shares, they could conceivably reduce the authorized share count again, which would further help raise the stock price. If done correctly, then the stock price could go above a penny and meet the OTCQB uplisting condition of a minimum bid price of 1 cent. This is a huge gamble, and I truly hope this is what UAV Corp is planning. As for the alternative, well, then maybe the bears were right, and this company is operating a scam to squeeze shareholders for every last fraction of a penny before running away. Only time will tell to see what happens. So that was a whole lot. Let's do a brief recap of 2025. We began the year with a reduction of authorized shares from 2 billion to 800 million to 500 million. We also received news that UAV Corp received $525 million in LOIs, with up to $1.5 billion in LOIs upon completion of the flight test milestone. Throughout the year, we've also seen an overwhelmingly number of share conversions and dilution. Sprinkled in was the successful inflation test, delays to the pilot's work visa, and delays to the weight balance analysis test. We've also seen the authorized share reduction completely reversed, where shares increased from 500 million to 1 billion and back to 2 billion. The spark of hope shareholders have now is an advanced $20 million LOI be converted to a $50 million term sheet that could jumpstart the company and turn the story around. To wrap up this 2025 review, I want to briefly mention an announcement made back in April. UAV Corp and AIG were invited to the Gemtech Forum, set this week on October 7th and 8th. We haven't heard of it recently, so it is not clear as to whether or not they will actually participate in it. The hope is that they do, as this helps start new conversations for more contracts. We'll have to see if they make any announcements about it this week, but fingers crossed. Throughout this video, I've mentioned UAV Corp's quarterly report quite a bit, and I want to briefly show their financials. A lot has changed with their debt conversion efforts, so it is likely that most of this information in the report is outdated. Their basis of presentation and going concern section sums up their status pretty well. That being, the company has incurred losses since inception and requires additional funds for future operating activities. The company's selling activity has not reached a level of revenue sufficient to fund its operating activities. Management's plans in the response to these factors includes the issuances of debt and common stock in exchange for cash and several out-of-country contracts currently in the final stages of negotiations. And the company's ability to meet its cash requirements in the next year is dependent on obtaining additional financing. In other words, the company is still in its baby phase and cannot sustain itself. Until it has the means to become profitable with its airships, it needs funding from outside sources. If we look at their statements of operations, which serves as their income statement, we can see that the revenue remains at zero. Their loss from operations was about $2.6 million, with $1.8 million of that going to officer compensation. Overall, their net loss was $2.4 million. So, not good. If we look at their cash flow, we can see that their net cash provided from financing activities, in the form of issuing convertible notes or cash advances, is roughly balancing the net cash used in operating activities. This is consistent with their earlier statement that they are solely relying on external financing to continue their operations. Note that the financing is currently not enough to balance their overall net loss, so this is an ongoing concern. If we look at their balance sheet, we can see that their total assets is about $900,000, while their total liabilities is about $7.2 million. That is about a liability to asset ratio of 8-to-1, so also not good. If we look at their stockholders' equity statement, we see that shareholder equity continues to drop due to the large amount of stocks issued for convertible debt and the company's accumulated deficit. Finally, if we look at their convertible debt section and compare it to their 2024 annual report, filed in March, we can see that UAV Corp is making efforts to pay off balances. As of June 30th, though, they still have $3.1 million remaining in convertible debt, which plays into why we've seen so much dilution this year. To sum up, the company finances are terrible, and they are relying on financing efforts to keep them afloat. This just goes to show how important it is for the company to resolve their debt with the upcoming $50 million term sheet, so that they can get on track to build out airships and become profitable. Alright, so we've covered a lot in this video, and now it's time up to wrap up the discussion by summarizing the bull and bear case. Since we've been on the bear train lately, let's begin with the bear case. As we just discussed, the company's financial statements are terrible. They rely on external financing and are not capable of sustaining themselves with sales yet. UAV Corp is a small team, so they are limited with what they can do. Their previous US pilot passed away, so they are reliant on their non-US pilot who does not yet have a finalized work visa. The company posted that they are working towards hiring and training new pilots, but will take time and funding to do so. They will also need to significantly grow their team in order to manufacture the Dart series of airships when the time has come. The company's communication has also been very poor, where shareholders' questions have not been addressed. PRs, teleconferences, and X-posts have not been as frequent as what investors want. The company has constantly delayed the weight balance analysis test since May, and the September teleconference that would have updated shareholders with the company's current status was also delayed. Now, to play devil's advocate though, UAV Corp is in the business with the government, so it is subject to the government's snail pace. It is also in the aviation and aerospace industry, which has about as much regulations as you can possibly have. So there's a lot of red tape that UAV Corp has to go through. Besides delays, the big story of 2025 has been share dilution, which has absolutely obliterated shareholders. Not only did the authorized shares double from 500 million to 1 billion on July 3rd, but it also doubled again to 2 billion on September 23rd. This increase completely reversed the 2 billion to 500 million authorized share reduction effort made in January earlier this year. The CEO and management team has full control over the company's voting power. This is why UAV Corp was able to change the authorized share cap without consulting shareholders. And finally, there is a growing concern of a reverse split. As mentioned earlier, the company is in the works to uplist to OTCQB, which requires a minimum stock bid price of 1 cent. Given that the stock price is in the triple zeros, the company may look to do a reverse split to further screw over shareholders if they cannot do a share buyback and naturally raise up the share price. Given all these points, shareholder sentiment is at an all-time low and is evident in the stock price. So there's a lot of risk involved with investing in this company. Now for the bull case. First up, this year's share dilution and drop in the share price may have caused. Now for the bull case. First up, this year's share dilution and drop in the share price has caused UMAV to have a very small market cap. Right now, the current market cap is below $1 million, and if we assume that 2 billion authorized shares are outstanding, then a share price of 0.0005 gives a market cap of $1 million. If the share price becomes 1 cent, then the market cap is $20 million. Next, is that there is an advanced $20 million LOI converting to a $50 million term sheet. Funds from this term sheet will go towards finishing the DART SA-70 development for upcoming tests, purchasing airship sensors and payloads, building the Sky Hangar to manufacture DART MA-600 airships, paying off remaining debt, and potentially buying back shares. UAV Corp is currently working towards uplisting to OTCQB, with their eventual goal of uplisting to NASDAQ. Their February 25th teleconference mentioned talks with UAV Corp joining other drone companies to merge into an existing NASDAQ company. This would be the quickest way for the company to get onto NASDAQ, but their current plans seem to be to try and get onto NASDAQ themselves. Earlier this year, UAV Corp announced that they secured $525 million in LOIs with a potential of up to $1.5 billion in total LOIs upon completion of their flight test milestones. The company's headquarters, airport, and manufacturing facility are all located in Florida, which is a strategic location for aviation. And finally, now is arguably the best time for U.S. drone and aerostat companies. Favorable government policy is in place to help companies enter the industry and sell their products to home and abroad. As mentioned throughout this video, there are several catalysts to keep in mind that can benefit the company. There is the Gemtech and Saudi Arabia Air Show this week, which would promote the company's name and potentially secure additional LOIs, assuming UAV Corp actually attends the event. There is the $50 million term sheet that is in the process of being finalized. We have yet to have a PR for this, but one is expected to be announced soon. There is the overdue weight balance analysis test and upcoming flight tests that will convert the LOIs to contracts. There is also the upcoming OTCQB uplisting that UAV Corp has been working towards. And finally, advancements in company hiring to build the Sky Hangar and airships would be a bullish indicator that the company is moving in the right steps to grow and develop their products for sale. This would give shareholders a great sense of confidence and that the company is moving towards becoming an actual company to sell products instead of just giving fancy advertisements for these big balls in the sky. So in conclusion, we are currently witnessing the most opportune time for aerostat products in the US and global market. UAV Corp has a small market cap and their stock price can explode if their upcoming catalysts are met. There is potential for the company finances to be significantly improved with the upcoming $50 million term sheet and supposed $525 million to $1.5 billion in LOIs. However, UAV Corp doesn't have a finalized product or a team or a hangar to manufacture their DART airships. Shareholders have continuously seen delays with the company obtaining the pilot's work visa and announcing a date for the weight balance analysis test. Shareholders have also been crushed by dilution, which has killed the stock price from all the way from 16 cents to hundredths of a cent. Overall, UMAV is a highly speculative investment for a company in their early stages. There is potential to see an increase in the share price if good news and positive developments come out. However, be aware that many investors are down more than 90% of their position, and if you invest, you could be joining that statistic. Overall, it's been quite a ride with UMAV and UAV Corp so far this year, and I'm sure the remaining year will continue to be interesting as well. So the question is, will this company fly to new heights or burst? Only time will tell. And I want to thank everyone for watching. I hope you found this deep dive interesting, and feel free to share your thoughts below on any information or considerations about the company that I may have missed. The more information we spread for fellow shareholders, I think, is the better. Thank you and have a good one.